Welcome everyone to another edition of the Classic Comic Archive, a series where I recap and review many of Marvel Comics' most seminal early issues. Our story for today is Fantastic Four 6, cover dated September of 1962. This issue marks the first supervillain team-up in Marvel Comics, one between Doctor Doom and Namor the Submariner. The issue was written by Stan Lee and drawn by Jack Kirby. Our issue opens up with a striking splash panel, showing the Human Torch as he's blazing through the skies of New York City. Watching from the streets below are a bunch of onlookers, many of them in disbelief at what they're seeing. In fact, one man named Harry doesn't even think that the Torch and the Fantastic Four are real, as he believes them to be nothing more than a product of mass hysteria. Yet this attitude quickly changes when he's suddenly shoved by an unseen force. It's actually the Invisible Girl, as she, like the Torch, is in a hurry to get back to the Fantastic Four's headquarters. But she didn't mean to push Harry, so being polite, she makes herself visible and then apologizes. This of course convinces him of the Fantastic Four's existence, but we can't linger on Harry for any longer, as the Invisible Girl's mission is of utmost importance. So let's instead shift focus to her as she's arrived at the Baxter Building, the skyscraper headquarters of the Fantastic Four. Inside she encounters a weary mailman, who's struggling to open up the building's express elevator. Except that it's not an express elevator, but the only way to get into the Fantastic Four's headquarters. The Baxter Building, being a massive skyscraper in the middle of Manhattan, actually houses many ordinary tenants. The Fantastic Four simply operate out of the top 4 floors. But with their unique security needs, they've constructed a secondary elevator shaft that only they can access. Regardless, let's pick back up with the Invisible Girl, as she's just arrived in the team's rec room. Scattered around the lounge are her teammates, but none of them seem very distressed. As it turns out, there's not much going on, and there's certainly no emergency. Apparently the Torch had just been out looking for any trace of Doctor Doom, the evil genius who'd escaped them in the last issue. But he didn't find anything, and was just rushing back for the fun of it. The Invisible Girl of course didn't know this, so she assumed that he had something important to report. But since he doesn't, all the team has left to do is read their mail. So Mr. Fantastic opens up a letter they'd received, and learns of a local boy who's sadly been hospitalized. Apparently he's a big fan of the Fantastic Four, and is being treated at a hospital not far from the Baxter Building. In fact, the hospital is so close, that Mr. Fantastic simply stretches himself out of a nearby window, and goes to pay him a visit. Meanwhile, the Things just read a less than pleasant letter. It's from the Yancey Street Gang, a pack of hooligans who for some reason hate him, and have challenged him to a fight. The Thing's obviously not going to brawl with a bunch of dumb kids, but that doesn't mean he'll just sit by and do nothing. So instead he grabs a nearby block of 6-inch titanium steel, and rolls it up with his immense strength. He then remarks that he'll send it to the Yancey Street Gang, and only if they can manage to unroll it, will he start taking them seriously. But speaking of taking things seriously, the Thing then mentions how bored he's become, as not since Doctor Doom and Namor has he faced a foe worthy of his strength. But as the old adage goes, be careful what you wish for. So let's shift focus away from the Fantastic Four, and to the latter of the two villains that the Thing is so eager to fight. It's Prince Namor the Submariner, and he's out in the ocean performing undersea tricks with a group of dolphins. But this innocent frolic is quickly interrupted by the sudden arrival of Doctor Doom. He's been looking for Namor for quite some time, and has finally found him thanks to the electronic scanner of his latest invention, the Aerosub. But at first, Namor thinks that Doom's just another meddlesome surface dweller. So to scare him away, he mightily leaps onto one of the Aerosub's wings. That's where he finally encounters Doom, as the menacing villain exits the sub, but reveals that he's only there to broker an alliance. While Namor's tempted by the offer, he wants to learn more, so being the prince he is, he plunges back into the ocean, and leads Doom to the ruins of his undersea kingdom, Atlantis. The two then enter an airlock chamber, and Doom begins pleading his case. He first brings up the tragic fall of Atlantis, when, while Namor was away, the civilization was accidentally destroyed by the surface world, in a detonation of an experimental nuclear weapon. It's uncertain if any of Namor's subjects were actually killed in the explosion, or if they simply abandoned their ruined home. But whatever the case may be, Doom then plays into Namor's desire for revenge, and offers him a chance to strike back at the surface world. So Namor agrees to join forces, and it's then revealed that their target will of course be the surface world's greatest defenders, the Fantastic Four. But this doesn't sit right with Namor, as although he despises the team's male members, he's helplessly infatuated with the Invisible Girl. So he makes it clear to Doom that no matter what happens, the Invisible Girl is not to be harmed. Doom accepts this condition, and then introduces Namor to the one weapon that can defeat the Fantastic Four. He calls it the Grabber, and it's a magnetic torpedo that can attach itself and then hoist any metal object on Earth, regardless of size or weight. To demonstrate this power, Doom launches the Grabber at the disembodied head of a nearby pagan idol. Apparently it's been stuck at the bottom of the ocean for centuries, yet is lifted away by the Grabber with ease. Thus it's Namor's job to plant the device, which can be disassembled and hidden at the Fantastic Four's headquarters. Then when ready, Doom will activate the Grabber, and begin wreaking havoc for the super team. Pleased with this plan, Namor then hides the Grabber's parts within his belt buckle, and flies off to New York City. Once there, he makes no effort to conceal his presence, as he simply walks through the city's busy streets to the Baxter Building. Passing pedestrians naturally tremble at his sight, but there's really nothing they can do about him. The only ones who could hope to confront Namor are of course the Fantastic Four, but they're a little preoccupied. Take Johnny for example, as he's sifting through the team's book collection, and happens to notice a glossy photograph tucked in the back. Pulling it out, he discovers that it's actually a photo of Namor. It was hidden away by Sue, as apparently she has feelings for him, just as he does for her. But Johnny doesn't find it cute or charming, as he thinks that Sue's going soft on their archenemy. So he threatens to destroy the photo, and Sue responds by turning invisible, and tries to snatch it away. Their ensuing struggle is eventually broken up by Reed and the Thing, who barge into the room and separate them. Reed, who mind you is Sue's boyfriend, then demands to know why she's hidden away a photo of Namor. Sue tries to explain herself by claiming that Namor's not as savage as they think, but before she can finish the thought, the Prince of Atlantis himself appears out of nowhere. A bewildered Thing then naturally demands to know how he'd gotten into the building, but Namor claims that he simply flew through an open window. This answer obviously doesn't dampen any of the Thing's concerns, as he then attempts to lunge at the Atlantean. So the more level-headed Reed, likely fearing the damage that an all-out brawl would bring, pulls away the Thing and gives Namor a chance to explain himself. Except it's then that Johnny, coming to the same brash conclusion as the Thing, rushes in to attack him. But even as he's then encased in a wall of flame, Namor doesn't bother fighting back. He's not there to battle, and simply waits for the torch to exhaust his flame. Thus once the headstrong teenager is too tired to fight, he steps forward and reveals that he's just there to strike a friendship with the team, as after all, his entire kingdom lays in ruin, and his people are nowhere to be found. He's just lonely, and wants to start over on the right foot. While a touching sentiment, only the Invisible Girl takes it at face value. So while the Thing keeps an eye on Namor, Reed and Johnny race off to go check if he's planted any traps in the building. To do this, they head to the projector room, and skim through its many security cameras. While they don't find anything suspicious, they're still not convinced of Namor's sincerity. So they order him to stay put, and start making their way back. But just as they arrive to grill him, the entire building is shaken by a massive tremor, as if it's been uprooted from the ground itself. Well, as it turns out, it just has. It's the Grabber, which Namor had sneakily planted in the building's basement. The device is being towed by Dr. Doom, who's piloting a rocket and dragging the entire building into space. But apparently Namor wasn't told of this part of the plan, and has thus been betrayed. So if he's going to make it out alive, he's going to have to work with the Fantastic Four, and they're going to have to work with him. So they momentarily set aside their differences, and begin thinking of a way to escape their plight. Coming to the obvious choice, they decide to board the Pogo plane, an advanced spacecraft designed by Mr. Fantastic, which is sitting in the building's hangar. But when they reach the hangar, they discover that the Pogo plane's toppled over, and won't be able to fly. Yet the plan isn't a complete bust, as they manage to retrieve a set of helmets and oxygen tanks from the Pogo plane. These, coupled with the suits that they're already wearing, or in the case of Namor and the Thing, their naturally indestructible bodies, allow them to survive in space if need be. And there sure is a need, as Namor reveals that the Grabber is being controlled by a special panel in Doom's ship. Thus if this panel is destroyed, the building will be released from the Grabber's unbreakable grasp. Hearing this, but not stopping to think for a moment, the Torch quickly opens a nearby window, flames on, and then rushes outside to destroy the panel. But of course there's no oxygen in space, and thus his flame immediately goes out. So Mr. Fantastic catches him before he starts falling back to Earth, and then makes his own attempt for the control panel. He first stretches his way to the top of the building, and then tries to extend himself all the way to Doom's ship. While a distance this great is incredibly taxing, it seems that Mr. Fantastic is just barely going to make it. But then, just as he's about to reach the ship, Dr. Doom activates its rocket, and spits out a torrent of flame. While this spurt is brief, and barely increases the distance between him and the ship, it does severely burn his hands. Thus he recoils in great pain, and retreats back to the Baxter Building, where his teammates bandage him up. But with both the Torch and Mr. Fantastic now powerless, there doesn't seem to be anyone left who can defeat Doom. So the Thing decides to spend his last waking moments battling Namor, as after all, he's the reason they're in this mess. But the two's ensuing brawl is then interrupted by a message from Doom, as he reveals that he's going to launch their building into the sun. Realizing that his battle with Namor is pointless, the Thing backs off, and then begins sulking in his coming demise. But Namor isn't ready to give up, as he then asks if the building's equipped with a water storage tank. The Invisible Girl tells him that there is, but she doubts that it'll be of any help. Thus she's apparently forgotten that Namor's the king of the sea, and is strengthened by even a droplet of water. So Namor rushes off to the storage tank, and bathes himself in its rejuvenating water. Then with a newfound strength, he bursts his way out of the Baxter Building, and mightily leaps to Doom's ship. Yet while it's indeed a mighty leap, Namor only manages to reach the craft by hopping onto a series of passing asteroids. Regardless, he's now on Doom's ship, and is ready to tear it apart. But Doom obviously has other plans, as he activates a magnetic field, and suddenly pins Namor to his ship's hull. But while this force keeps the prince from getting up, it can't stop him from getting down. So Namor sinks his fists into the ship's metal frame, and powerfully crashes his way through. But there's still one last thing in his way, a massive door that separates the ship's fuselage from its cabin, and thus Namor from Doom. So the mighty prince tries to force it open with his sheer strength, but is repelled by the sudden discharge of an electric current. This shock is in fact so powerful, that for all that Doom can tell, it's killed Namor. So he lowers his guard, and prepares to release the Baxter Building from his magnetic grasp. But just as he touches the lever to release it, he's suddenly overwhelmed by another electric current. Except that it's the very same one he'd used against Namor, as the Submariner, like an electric eel, had actually absorbed the shock, and is now directing it back at him. But unlike Namor, Doom can't absorb this massive amount of electricity. So with no other option but to die or surrender, he leaps out of his ship, and into the vastness of space. But he still manages to escape, as he latches onto a passing, speeding asteroid that carries him away. As for Namor, he's now in control of Doom's ship, and has the perfect opportunity to finally vanquish the Fantastic Four. Yet he doesn't. Instead, he simply guides the Baxter Building right to where it had been, and flies off without saying a word. Thus the Fantastic Four are left to wonder if Namor is truly their enemy. But they don't have much time to ponder, as the Torch heads to the basement and discovers the grabber, right where Namor said it was. So they all rush to the basement and try to yank it off the ceiling, but even their combined strength is helpless against its unbreakable magnetic grip. But then, as they're trying to think up a way to remove it, the grabber suddenly detaches itself and flies away. It's going to Namor, who's piloting Doom's ship over the ocean. But he has no plans to keep it around, as he intentionally crashes the grabber into the ship, thereby destroying them both. The issue subsequently ends as he ushers the wreckage to the bottom of the ocean, and decries that for now, the ocean is where he'll remain. That concludes Fantastic Four 6, and another episode of the Classic Comic Archive. But as always, I would like to offer a brief review of this issue. Overall, I thought that this was a fun and exciting story. While its plot was rather outlandish, in a way, it almost had to be. Both Namor and Dr. Doom had memorable first appearances, where they also concocted outlandish world-ending evil schemes. So what better way to top those threats, than by shoving all of our main characters into outer space? It certainly raised the stakes, and provided for an issue that simply had some fun, and didn't take itself too seriously. But in any case, let me know what you thought of this issue and the video, and feel free to suggest other classic comics for me to cover. Thanks for watching.